If you're an INTP, you've spent your life pretending to care about conversations that feel like noise. You've smiled, nodded, learned the right phrases. But deep down, you've always wondered, why does this feel so wrong? You've played along at parties, team meetings, family dinners. You've laughed when the room laughed. You've made eye contact. You've said things like, not much, you? Or, yeah, pretty crazy weather lately. But it never felt like you were there. Not really. Because while everyone else seemed content to skim the surface, you were always pulled toward the depths. You weren't bored. You weren't shy. You were just aware that something important was missing, and no one else seemed to notice. Have you ever stood in a crowd surrounded by voices and motion and felt like you were watching it all through glass? Your body's in the room, but your mind has left, not out of apathy, but out of self-preservation. Because there's something deeply unnatural about pretending a connection is happening when it isn't. And here's the part that makes it harder. You can fake it. You've gotten good at it. You've adapted. You've memorized just enough of the social playbook to survive in spaces that don't understand you. You've worn the mask so long it almost feels like yours. But it never quite fits. You're supposed to enjoy these moments. You're supposed to engage, to network, to banter. But somewhere along the line, you realize that saying the right words doesn't make it a conversation, and smiling at the right time doesn't make it connection. So what is it then? Why does the most basic form of human interaction, small talk, feel like something you have to survive? You're not cold. You're not broken. You're not antisocial. You're just built for something more. And the way the world communicates isn't built for you. And maybe that discomfort you've been carrying isn't a flaw to fix. Maybe it's a signal to follow. You don't hate talking, you hate wasting language, though. For you, words aren't just sounds, they're tools, blueprints, signals. You use them with purpose. So when a conversation asks you to speak without saying anything, your brain hesitates. It's not anxiety, it's not awkwardness, it's logic. You lead with introverted thinking. That means your mind constantly weighs the value of every sentence. It wants clarity, precision, truth. It wants to build ideas, not just trade them. But small talk isn't about building, it's about performing. It's a ritual everyone seems fluent in, but one you've always questioned. How's it going? Not bad, you? Crazy weather, huh? And you think, is this it? Because none of this is wrong, but none of it is real either, and your mind notices that immediately. Beneath it all, there's a disconnect, a contradiction. Everyone agrees to say things they don't mean, to protect a comfort they don't examine. You can play along, you have. But inside, something resists, because every time you trade a thought for a script, it feels like you're shrinking to fit into a space you were never meant to occupy. And here's the deeper problem. This isn't just uncomfortable, it's exhausting. Because your weakest function, the one you trust the least, is extroverted feeling. That's the function responsible for managing social dynamics, reading emotions, and playing the unspoken rules of polite interaction. And when that function gets triggered, it doesn't feel like connection. It feels like surveillance, like you're being asked to constantly monitor your performance just to pass for normal. Every smile becomes a calculation, every nod becomes a decision tree. And suddenly, what looks like an easy 5-minute chat on the surface becomes a mental obstacle course. And yet no one sees it. To them, you're just quiet, or aloof, or maybe even rude, but what they miss is that your silence isn't disinterest, it's restraint. You're holding back not because you have nothing to say, but because what you do want to say doesn't belong in that space. And when the world rewards performance over sincerity, your way of speaking, your way of being, starts to feel invisible there. But invisible doesn't mean irrelevant. It means you're observing, filtering, waiting for something real. Because you don't just want interaction, you want alignment. You want moments that crack the surface, that bypass the script, that ask questions worth answering. So when you don't speak, it's not absence, it's protest. And when you do speak, it's never just to fill silence. It's to break it with something true. Every conversation costs you something, and most people don't even realize it. They walk into a room, shake hands, laugh on cue, bounce from topic to topic like skipping stones on a pond, and they leave energized, recharged, connected. You walk into that same room and feel like you're slowly drowning. It's not that you don't want connection, you crave it, maybe more than most. But the way everyone else goes about it feels foreign, like they're speaking a dialect of human interaction you never fully learned. You smile, you answer, you mimic. But under the surface, you're calculating every move. That's the part they don't see. Every second of that interaction is work. Your brain is decoding body language, measuring timing, analyzing phrasing, mapping emotional terrain. It's not intuitive, it's not natural. It's a manual process and it runs constantly. Wow. And then comes the flood. Socializing for most people triggers dopamine. It feels good. It feels exciting. It's a chemical reward that says, do more of this. But for you, that same stimulation doesn't feel rewarding. It feels overwhelming. The lights, the small talk, the expectation to perform, it doesn't fill you up. It drains you. Your mind runs on acetylcholine, the chemical of introspection, of focus, of deep thought. That's why you feel more alive when you're alone in your own mind than when you're surrounded by chatter. That's why an hour of building something, an idea, a system, a theory, feels like nourishment, while 5 minutes of surface-level socializing can feel like erosion. You've learned how to function in those environments. You've played the part. But after a while, something shifts. You start noticing that the cost of connection, when it's built on scripts and expectations, is higher than the reward. And then the guilt creeps in. You wonder if you're broken, if you're cold, if maybe everyone was right, that you need to come out of your shell. But they don't understand that your shell is an armor, it's architecture, it's the place where you've built your ability to think, reflect, and exist without pretense. It's not that you're fragile, it's that you're deliberate. And that deliberateness is often misread as distance. But the real reason you hesitate in conversation, the reason you pull back, analyze, withdraw, isn't because you don't care. It's because you care so much that you can't bear to fake it. And when you do try, the cost shows up later. Like the INTP who told me they once pre-rehearsed answers for every "what's new with you" question at a holiday party. They planned out just enough to pass as social. They smiled, they laughed, everyone thought they fit in. Then they went home and felt like a part of themselves had been edited out of existence. Because even when it works, it doesn't feel like success, it feels like erasure. That's why conversation, especially small talk, can feel like combat. Not because you're fighting the other person, but because you're fighting the part of you that wants to stay whole in a world that keeps asking you to shrink. You've been told your whole life that small talk is harmless, a social lubricant, a way to ease into deeper things. But what no one admits is that most conversations never get past that surface. They circle it, hover over it, protect it like it's sacred. And for someone like you, that's not harmless, it's soul-numbing. Because every time someone asks, "So what do you do?" or "Been busy lately?" and expects you to play along, they're not really inviting you to connect. They're asking you to perform. They're asking you to trade authenticity for acceptability. But for you, that trade comes at a cost. You've spent your whole life observing the way people use language, the way they construct personas, the way they default to comfort over truth. And you've learned that small talk isn't just empty, it's protective, it's a shield against vulnerability, and you can't pretend not to see that. Because once you do see it, it becomes impossible to unsee. You start noticing how much of modern communication is scripted, how rarely people mean what they say, how often we answer questions with preloaded replies designed to keep things simple and safe. And if there's one thing your mind resists, it's pretense disguised as connection. That's why you don't just find small talk boring, you find it dishonest, you find it disorienting. Because while everyone else seems fine navigating the social script, you're sitting there wondering why we're all ignoring the elephant in the room. None of this is real. You're not asking for vulnerability from everyone. You're not demanding that every conversation go deep. You're just wondering why we've all agreed to keep things so shallow. And over time, you start withdrawing, not out of rejection, but out of self-preservation. You start saying less because fewer people seem to be listening. You start opting out of interactions because too many of them ask you to leave part of yourself behind. But every once in a while, something breaks through. Someone asks a real question. Someone pauses after a surface-level exchange and says, "But actually, how are you doing?" And in that moment, your guard drops. Because you've been waiting. You've been ready. That's what people don't see. You're not against connection. You're against the performance that's replaced it. And when someone finally puts the script down, you don't just open up, you light up. Because you're not cold. You're just waiting for the room to warm up enough to show who you really are. There's a strange comfort in being misunderstood, because it means you never have to perform for people who don't see you. But you've always wanted more than comfort. You've wanted clarity. You've wanted truth, and most of all, you've wanted to be seen for who you are without translation. Not everyone will understand the quiet person in the room who observes more than they speak, who listens not for politeness but for meaning, who notices the subtle contradictions in people's stories and hears what's not being said. But the ones who do, they never forget you, so that's the paradox of the INTP. You go unnoticed in the moment and unforgettable in hindsight, and because when you finally speak, it changes the tone of the room, not with volume, but with weight. You don't speak to be heard, you speak because you've already listened, and the words that come out have been measured, tested, refined. They've passed through the filters that most people never use. That's not social awkwardness, that's mental architecture. Think of Paul Dirac, a man so quiet that people mistook his silence for absence. But his silence wasn't empty, it was precise. Once, when asked why he didn't say more at conferences, he replied, "I was taught that when one has nothing to say, one should say nothing." That wasn't arrogance, it was integrity. There's another story, a real one, about Dirac and Werner Heisenberg, two of the greatest minds in physics. They were on a ship. Heisenberg asked Dirac why he never danced. Dirac answered, "When there are nice girls, it is a pleasure." Heisenberg laughed and said, "Exactly." Dirac stared at him and asked, dead serious, "But how do you know beforehand that the girls are nice?" That's the INTP in one moment. Everything must make sense. Everything must align. Even in a social ritual like dancing, the logic has to hold. It's not that you reject human connection, you reject arbitrary connection. And when you finally find people who don't need to be entertained, people who don't treat depth like a burden, you begin to unmask. Because those people don't drain you, they feed you. They don't require you to dilute yourself, they invite you to expand. And then it happens. The silence that once felt like a barrier becomes your strength. Your words stop being rare because you're unsure. They become rare because you're intentional. And what you offer, when you choose to offer it, is not chatter, it's clarity. Even fiction recognizes this. The Little Prince moved through worlds filled with adults who were obsessed with power, routine, and numbers, things that meant nothing. He asked questions that made them uncomfortable, not because he wanted to cause discomfort, but because he was searching for something real. He wasn't lost. He was just surrounded by people who had forgotten how to speak without masks. You know that feeling. You've been in rooms full of people who were all talking, and still felt like the only one who wasn't being heard. You've made jokes to break tension that didn't exist for you. You've simplified your ideas so others wouldn't feel overwhelmed. You've held back insights because you weren't sure anyone else wanted the truth. But that doesn't mean you're not meant to speak. It means you're meant to speak when it counts. It means your silence isn't emptiness, it's a prelude. There's a moment when you stop trying to adjust your voice to match the room and start adjusting the room to honor your voice. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly in the decisions you make. You stop accepting invitations that require a version of you that isn't real. You stop measuring your worth by your ability to play along. You stop shrinking, and instead you start choosing. You choose spaces that don't exhaust you, people who don't expect a performance, conversations that don't make you feel like you're disappearing the longer they go on. You don't need to fix the way you talk. You need to find places where your way of thinking is a contribution. not a complication. And when you do, something powerful happens. Your quiet becomes magnetic, your ideas become anchors, and your presence starts to speak before you ever say a word. Because you're not trying to fill space anymore, you're shaping it. You were never meant to master small talk, you were meant to master substance. In a world obsessed with speed, your slowness is wisdom. In a culture built on constant engagement, your silence is clarity. You don't need to speak more to matter, you just need to speak with meaning. And when you do, when the moment is right and the mask is gone, and the space is honest, what you say will do more than start a conversation. So it will shift something out. Because the truth you carry isn't loud, but it's real. If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you had to leave part of yourself behind to stay in it, this is for you. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of noise, this is for you. If your silence has ever been mistaken for indifference, distance, coldness, this is for you. You're not broken, you're not hiding. You're just waiting for something real. And when you find it, or when you create it, you won't hesitate. You'll speak. And it won't be noise, it'll be truth. If this made you feel seen, don't just like the video, leave a comment. Say the thing you've never said in a room full of noise. Share this with someone who's always felt a little out of place, but never knew why. And if you want more conversations that don't ask you to perform, subscribe. Because this space was built for people like you. Let's make silence powerful again. Let's make depth normal.